Hey friends, Catherine here from Research Rockstar, and today I'd like to have a conversation about preparing for that next big survey project. So, at the time of this broadcast, it is December of 2017, and a lot of folks are getting ready for new projects that are going to be kicking off right at the beginning of the new year. So, how can we use these next couple of weeks when things can be a little bit slow, waiting to make sure that we kick off those next new projects with excellence? So, let me ask you a question. How will you prepare for that next big survey project? Now, I'm sure you have some things that you like to do to get ready for a new project, but have you ever really thought about what are all the things that you can do to really make sure that you're prepared for that project really with excellence so that you really go in prepared and ready to rock? Well, here are some of the things that we typically do in professional market research. First of all, before we start a project, we make sure that we have clear and documented objectives. We also want to make sure that we have clear and documented application goals. That is, it's not enough just to know what our clients' objectives are. We need to have an understanding of how they plan to apply the research results. This will have implications for how we design the content of the questionnaire, and it will also have implications for how we report the research results at the end of the project. Of course, we need a great sample source, and we need precise population requirements. What are our screening requirements? What are our quota requirements? Are we adhering to census distributions? What's our sampling frame? All of that information needs to be very clear. And of course, we need to have clear client expectations. I often will ask in a kickoff meeting, for example, I will ask a client, at the end of this project, what will be your criteria for success? I want to know what the client's criteria for success are. Usually I hear the same sorts of things, but every once in a while I'll get a surprise, and that can be hugely helpful information. Obviously, I want the client to be satisfied. And of course, we also need great hypotheses and well thought out scope. These last 2 points are especially important because one of the things that we know as professional market researchers is that there are some things that can happen that prevent us from having an awesome questionnaire design. And we never want to be in a situation where we are at the end of data collection and we realize, boy, our analysis would have been so much better if we just asked this one other question or just captured these 2 other variables. It's a nightmare situation. And one of the ways we avoid that nightmare situation is by really making sure that we do have great hypotheses and well thought out scope. So these are the things we need to do to prepare to really make sure that that questionnaire design is going to be awesome. So how do we do that? Well, in some cases, you'll be working with a client who really already has some awesome hypotheses. They have some very precise hypotheses that they're looking to test in this quantitative project. However, not always, right? Sometimes a client has some ideas. They know they're trying to understand maybe customers' unmet needs, or they know that what they want to do is understand what drives loyalty, but maybe they haven't really gotten to the point where they've hypothesized specific items for that study. So we often will need to help them. And this is going to help us to design a great questionnaire, right? So we need those great hypotheses, and we also need to have a really well thought out scope. You know, how broad is this going to be, right? So a lot of times we'll get into these 2 bullet points during a kickoff meeting, right? We very conventionally will have a brainstorming aspect to our kickoff agenda where we get to work with our client and our team and maybe other related subject matter experts to really make sure that we have some great hypotheses and a well thought out scope. And if brainstorming isn't going to be quite enough, if we need to go outside of our own bubble and our client's bubble to make sure we're being really thorough, of course there are other options. A lot of researchers will use focus groups as a phase 1 prior to a phase 2 quantitative survey for just that reason. And frankly, that's what we've been doing for 30 plus years. I've done hundreds of projects that were a focus group project that fed into the quantitative survey project by making sure that we had identified the right hypotheses and that we had an awesome scope that was going to be really perfect for this particular client. So focus groups can be a great way to do that. IDIs, in-depth interviews, can be a great way to do that. But what I'd like to talk about a little bit today is social media research. Very often when I talk to people about social media research, they seem to get a little overwhelmed, like every social media research project is going to be a big giant project and I'm going to need a complex, expensive tool and lots of expertise. And, you know, it doesn't have to be not every social media research project has to be at that level, right? I mean, there are a lot of awesome things that we can do with social media research, and certainly there are some brands that are using social media research for awesome applications to truly understand what's going on with its customer base, what's going on with word of mouth, what's going on with emerging product requirements, right? So all sorts of things are awesome. But specifically with this idea of trying to use social media research as an alternative to focus groups and IDIs as a phase one prior to a quantitative phase two, it doesn't have to be that complicated. Let me share an example with you. I like to use fairly low cost tools, frankly, unless I'm working with a client who has a more robust need and they're going to be licensing a more significant, comprehensive tool for their social media research needs. So for my own needs, frankly, for doing demonstrations for Research Rockstar classes or for doing little case studies, I'll use the free and low cost tools. One of the low cost tools that I do sometimes use is Tracker. And so just as a simple example, I'm pretending that I'm about to do a major new quantitative project, a big survey about the Greek yogurt market. And let's say I've never done research in that sector before. I know nothing about Greek yogurt. Sure, my client has maybe shared some of their past research. That's always a great thing to get from a client. And we've had some great conversations and I've read some articles, but I'm really not an expert on consumer attitudes and behaviors related to Greek yogurt. So can I use social media research as an alternative to focus groups or in-depth interviews for this phase of hypothesis generation and scope setting? So I took 20 minutes of my day to do a little practice and a little case study, and I just entered Greek yogurt into the tool to see what would come up. And when different tools, social media research tools have, different types of interfaces. This one is a nice, simple interface. On the left-hand side, it gives me some icons so I can see what the source of the mentions are. So the tool is basically harvesting from the public-facing parts of the internet mentions of Greek yogurt and then sorting them by date, letting me know what the sources were. Was this from Facebook, from Twitter, etc.? And also you'll see on the far right side some indications of whether or not it was coded as having some sentiment value, where green would be good and red would be bad. By the way, it's not uncommon with a lot of these tools to see that many of the mentions are neutral. That may be a function of two things. Sometimes it's a function of whether or not the tool is very sophisticated and sensitive. And two, in some product categories, it's actually a very valid result. So there are a lot of product categories where a lot of the social mentions are indeed neutral. It's basically, hey, there's a new coupon. That's not really a positive sentiment or negative sentiment. It's factual. Right? So we would expect that to be neutral. So the percent of neutral mentions in a sentiment analysis will vary a great deal by your topic, by your brand that you're doing research on or your product category. Anyway, I don't want to go too far down that path, but the point is, instead of doing focus groups for my hypothetical Greek yogurt project, I said, I'm going to go and just take 20 minutes and see what I can learn using a social media research tool. So I get all these results in seconds. Well, then what happened? Well, I had looked at just a 24-hour range, that is the most recent 24 hours, what were the mentions, and what can I learn from them? I got 300 items returned, of course, very quickly in under a minute. Well, what did I learn? Well, when I scanned through those items, what I found was I learned a lot about brands, because a lot of the people talking about Greek yogurt talk about the brands that they use, they like, they dislike. So I got a great key brand list, which was fantastic for me. I also saw things that indicated customer behavior. Now, you'd think Greek yogurt, what's the behavior? They buy it, they eat it, right? Well, it turns out there are other behaviors. For example, I found that there are a lot of people who cook with Greek yogurt. Apparently that's a thing. And people like to share recipes about cooking with Greek yogurt. So that was a customer behavior that I hadn't known about, that I hadn't anticipated, and I never would have had a hypothesis about, but I discovered it using social media research. I also saw a lot of clues about customer aspirations. People who use Greek yogurt to be healthy, to be fit, to aspire to different things about being more conscious about what they're eating. There were also aspirations about convenience, people who really loved, gosh, I don't ever want to think about what I'm having for lunch again. I just throw my Greek yogurt into my bag and I'm good for the day. So a lot of different things around aspirations. I also did discover some brand perceptions. People had specific mentions of brands, and I could see that there were certain brands that were considered more sort of organic or more kid-friendly. I saw some brands that were considered more high-end and more sophisticated in their flavor options. And what was really fascinating was unmet customer needs. Being new to this, looking at this market, there was no way that I had any real insight about unmet customer needs. So hearing what people had in terms of frustrations with Greek yogurt was fascinating. Now, maybe some of these are things a client could address. Maybe some of them aren't, right? There were a lot of comments, for example, about shelf life issues. I'm not sure whether or not that's something people can really do anything about per se, but certainly knowing that that's a source of frustration gives us some clues that perhaps could be addressed through marketing or education or packaging, right? So all of these things came from 20 minutes. And frankly, if we consider the value of the time and the cost of the tool for an entire month, we're really talking about less than $50 to complete this task. So this is a great example to show that we can learn a lot about the hypotheses and setting the scope for a big survey project through social media research. Now, I do want to be clear. I am a big fan of focus groups and in-depth interviews. And when I have the budget or time, I think that those are awesome options to do that discovery phase before a quantitative phase. However, these days, I see a lot of clients who frankly don't have the time or the budget to do that robust of a phase one. So I still want a phase one, but in these cases, I might look at social media research listening instead of focus groups or IDIs. And by the way, there's another important reason to use social media research as a phase one. If you're doing work with global brands, this does eliminate the risk of being overly dependent on results from specific geographies, especially if you are doing traditional in-person focus groups. Usually you're going to do 2 or 3 cities. And if you're doing focus groups as a phase one to a phase two project, it's uncommon to do more than 3 cities. So you're getting very geographic specific information, where social media research, you're getting a huge geography, right? So you're getting a lot of great information. Now, what are the cons? Well, there are some challenges with social media research. Like any data source, it's not perfect. And one of the things is there's no screening criteria here. So I learned about brands, I learned about brand perceptions, I learned about unmet customer needs, but I have no idea whose. I don't know if those were primarily for men or women. I don't know what their household income was. I don't know what their education level was. I don't even know how long they've been eating Greek yogurt, right? So there's no screening here. So again, I'm not saying that social media research is equivalent to focus group research. I'm just saying that it's an awesome option that can be used for cases where you want that geographic, more of a geographic spread or representation, or when you don't have time or money to do a full focus group phase one prior to a quantitative phase two. I hope that was a great example for folks who are planning their big new 2018 quantitative research projects and want to really make sure that that next questionnaire they design is going to be awesome. Social media research tools are something that you can try. I encourage you to at least do an experiment. A lot of the social media research tool companies do offer free trials. So you can sign up and get a free trial so you can try it for yourself. Take your product category. Maybe you're doing research on, I don't know, organic pet food or wine in a box, whatever it is, and just see what's out there and see whether or not it would help you to inform your the hypotheses for your project and help you set the scope for your next project. Thanks everybody for joining me today, and if this is a topic that's of interest, I do want to point out that coming up very soon I am going to be teaching our 90-minute class on social media research. Excuse me, we actually expanded it to be 2 full hours because 90 minutes was a bit rushed. This is a great beginner's level course. If you haven't ever done social media research and you're really trying to understand what it's about and you want to understand how to do it and some planning considerations and what some of the cool applications are, please join me on December 20th at 1 p.m. Eastern, and I'll be teaching that class. And if that class is just part of what you're looking for in general for qualitative research training, I also want to let you know that in January, we have a 4-week class on online qualitative research methods, and this is taught by the amazing Karen Lynch. Karen is an extremely experienced qualitative researcher who uses a lot of online tools. So she's fantastic because she's really an expert in doing traditional focus groups and in-depth interviews, but she's also an expert on leveraging all these cool new online qual tools too. So she's a great resource, a great instructor, and a great person to ask all of your qual questions to. So those are a couple of courses we have coming up. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please come and visit us at researchrockstar.com, where we publish a lot of articles as well. And also, please do like the videos and subscribe to our YouTube or Apple iTunes podcasts. Thanks, everybody, and have a great day.